Welcome to AGP Quickies. This week we are going to be talking about The Last of Us. What was this? Episode 8, Max? Season 1,
Yes,
episode 8?
yes, sir.
We got one episode left for the season. And let's get into it, Max. Let's talk about it. This might be the last season for me, but we're going to get into my thoughts on it in a second. Max, what do you got for us? Let's start with the bad. What was the bad?
Oh man, the bad. I honestly struggle to find much bad in the episode, other than the fact that there's no infected. Um, I'm not like a big zombie guy. Like my favorite stuff about The Walking Dead was always the people interactions, not the zombies. My favorite thing about The Last of Us has always been the people and the stories there. But we are now like 2 full episodes with one infected in the entire episode. Over 2 episodes, like that's pretty
Well,
small.
what about the episode before? I don't think there was any
There
infected
was
in the
there was
episode.
only one episode there was only one infected in episode 7, and then in episode 6. Yeah, were
I
there
don't think
any
there was any in
infected?
episode 6.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't think there was any in episode 6, which was a fantastic episode. But yeah, it was all just about them being in Jackson and everything. And yeah, you're right. Wow, there have not been infected for a while. The episode before that, they had like the bloater and stuff, so that was good. But
Right,
yeah,
right. That was
it's
great. That was
like,
great.
and like it. The game is all about the people too, but the zombies or whatever you want to call them, the infected, are a big piece. So for me, that's kind of a negative. Like in the game, there's a good interaction between David and Ellie when they're waiting for James to come back, and they get overrun by some infected. I think that would have been nice to add some of that in, because
Yeah,
it builds on this, like, because maybe it's hard for me to say because I knew David was a bad guy, right? I'm wondering
yeah,
if the show makes it seem like David isn't so bad at first, or if in the show the way it's portrayed, you always think he's bad. You know what I mean? Because in the game, that like moment where they interact endears you towards David when they fight against the
right,
infected, and you think,
right.
oh, maybe this is actually a good guy. Maybe she found a community that's actually going to be helpful, and you learn fairly quickly that that's not the case. But um, was a little bummed they didn't have any of that, because even if it was 2 or 3 infected and that's it, like for him to build rapport and trust with her could have been
Yep.
really valuable,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and endear the audience to only then to have the rug pulled out from under you that he's a rapist, he's a cannibal, he's a murderer, all of that. He's a terrible, terrible human being. So those are, I guess,
Yeah.
that's my only negative. What about you?
So there was a lot of negatives. And like, we've talked about Last of Us before, and I've talked about how some of it's been so good. But at this point, there's only really to me been a few episodes that have been really good, and the rest of it has just been like me trying to muscle through and hoping that the next episode's good. And like this episode, I'm waiting for more infected because there's so many missed opportunities and really important parts of the game that include infected that have not been included, and there's been so few of it. And while yes, I agree that the game is about the people, the thing that is like causing the situation to be tense between the people is the infected. They're a very core part of the story. And for them to just constantly not be in at all doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah,
so they have, yeah,
well, I was just gonna say it's tough in the show because like the whole point of the story is you're taking Ellie to find the fireflies to hopefully get a cure. And in
yeah,
the game, that's very apparently needed. And in the show, it's still needed, like, especially in, I think, Boston, you see that horde of infected. Like, yes, we
yeah.
know that they're there, but the show is not illustrating as clearly that the world is overrun by these things.
It's not
Uh,
making it seem that important at all. Like, it's just like maybe every once in a while we might have to worry about some infected somewhere on the planet. Maybe. I don't know. But it's like, they travel across the country and they don't run into anything.
it is
So it's
lowering the stakes. It's true.
Yeah, yeah. Plus lots of other moments that needed them to be involved. But anyway, like the what they did at the beginning of the episode, making David be like the preacher guy, very much gave away how, crappy of a person he is, how manipulative he is, like right away. And so that completely removed the tension from the situation when he's with Ellie. It just ruined that whole part for me. And then, like you said, like she does have to reluctantly trust him when they fight some infected. Um, and that's not there, you know? So it just it removes that element to where he's did a much better job in the game of attempting to manipulate Ellie, even though it didn't work. Like him attempting to manipulate Ellie was far better, more well done in the game than it was in the show. And they ruined that opportunity by doing the Christian preacher at the beginning and wasting that screen time on something that they didn't need, and ruined other parts of the episode. So it it to me, it just was like another thing where they're going off and doing something that wasn't in the game, wasn't needed, and it's taking away from the rest of the show. And that's just becoming a repeating pattern.
Yeah, I can agree with that. That's a valid point. I mean, overall, I loved the episode. Like, I wouldn't rate it as highly as the Mandalorian that we are also reviewing, but yeah, no, that's a valid point. I mean, that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like with this idea of if this is your first exposure, do you immediately know David's bad? And I think you're right. Like the way that they were portraying it and the music and everything at the beginning with that like preacher element, I think I think a fresh viewer knew from the get go that this guy was bad, and the
Yeah.
interactions he has with James and everything, and that is a bummer because I do remember in the game kind of being blindsided by it and thinking, "Oh, this is a nice guy," and then like,
It makes you wonder if she should be, you kind of like, for me, it was like I always leaned towards he's probably a bad dude, but there was always that like thought in the back of my head,
yeah,
like,
there
what if
was
we're
the
wrong about this guy?
yeah,
Whereas in the show, there was no questioning it. It was like, okay, this is a creepy dude right from the beginning. Like, you know, um, and he didn't do hardly anything to really convince her that he was a good dude at all,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So,
I mean, I like seeing a lot of things come to life from the game. Like the whole buddy boy thing, like she like that line, that whole piece of dialogue when she encounters them is
mhm,
pretty much straight up from the game.
yeah,
You and buddy boy over there, put your gun down, whatever she says. And then of course, when David's trying to seduce her, I didn't get okay, so here's another I guess here's another negative. The game made it very clear that he was coming on to her when
yeah,
Ellie's in the cell, and that he is
mhm,
like a pedophile.
yeah,
Um, the show, I don't feel like I wasn't getting as much of that vibe until very near the end of the conversation, and part of me was like, "Am I only getting the vibe because I know that he is?" You know what I mean? Like, it just I
yeah,
do think that they weren't showing that pedophile vibe as much from the guy,
yeah,
which adds an even extra layer of hatred. Like you as the viewer or gamer are supposed to hate this guy. And to the in the game when you get to the point where you're like trying to kill him, like you want him gone because he's
yeah,
tried to come onto you. He's a murderer, a cannibal, all these things. Like just a bad guy. Tried to
yeah,
kill Joel, all that. So I like that interaction though. Like by the time it seemed like he was coming onto her, she comes up, grabs his hand, same thing as in the game, breaks his finger, and
yeah,
then slashing the butcher's knife into James and all that, and then burning the tavern down. Like all that was great. And I always
Yeah.
forget. I've played the game 3 times and I've watched the show. I always forget that Joel doesn't come in and save her. I was sitting there watching the show,
Mhm.
and even though I've played the game 3 times, I'm like, "All right, when's Joel showing up? When's he gonna come help her again? When's he gonna save her?" And I watched the after of the episode, and that was always the whole point. They were like, we wanted to change that dynamic of like the hero coming in and saving the day, and instead Ellie having to get out of this on her own, and then Joel shows up after she's already taken care of it to
Yeah.
provide like fatherly comfort. And so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, Joel was her emotional relief after the trauma happened, right? And I felt like that was a really good way to do that in the game. Um, but there's things like I agree. There's certain scenes where it was like that was just like the game, and it was really well done, and it was awesome. I liked it. And they don't have to things don't have to be one to one. The things that they are doing that's one to one, it's like, okay, that's cool. I like that. Not everything has to be exactly one to one, but if you're going to do something, if you're going to make changes, like they need to be good changes, like and they're just not like there's a lot other, there's a lot of small things where I was watching it and I was just like, this is dumb. Why did they do this? Like for example, Ellie is, she's hunting with a gun, where in the game she hunts with a bow. And
yeah,
the
I
reason
agree.
why it was bad that she was using a gun is because that actress can't hold a gun. She's just like, I don't know if she's just like not a big enough person, but she just looked like an idiot holding a gun. Like, and and then like there was another part where she's hacking away at David and she's like losing her mind. In the game, like Joel comes up and stops her from hacking at him. He finds her in the building and he gets her when she's doing that. And she's freaking out, right? Whereas in the show, he walks up after she's like walking out of the building and like taps her on the shoulder and freaks her out. Like, why'd you do that? Why didn't you say, hey, Ellie? Like, like, why'd you sneak up on her? Like, it didn't make any sense. like,
But yeah,
like what you just came up and said, hi, I'm gonna spook you after you just dealt with a bunch of cannibals. Like, it didn't make any sense. But also going back to, you talking about him being a P word, right? Like he like the other thing, there were two other things that made it seem like he was going to be really creepy, and it wasn't necessarily David, right? In the game, what happened is, first off, there were his followers were talking about Ellie and saying it's David's new plaything, right? And so that, like, it wasn't necessarily even anything David did, but there were extra characters that were talking about him being her plaything, or her being his plaything, right?
yeah,
And then, but also, when you are playing the game, you don't see any women. There's not a single woman at the cannibal camp. And so when you're like watching that and you're just like, it's a camp full of men, and there's one little girl that comes in and they're talking about her being his plaything, then you're like, okay, this is getting to be a really creepo situation, right? Whereas they didn't display that at all in the show. Like in the show, they're like, oh, there's tons of women around and nobody's talking about her that way. And
yeah. I
like,
actually thought that they were going to hint at the beginning of the episode that other young woman, who's the daughter of the man Joel killed. I thought they were going to hint that he had been doing things with her,
yeah,
um, because of my previous knowledge of the character from the game. But they didn't really
yeah,
ever. I feel like they alluded a little bit to it. He's like,
it
"I'm
was
your
very
daddy,"
slight.
basically.
Yeah,
Uh,
very slight.
but I mean, I think they did an okay job at making him creepy. But I will agree that the game did a better job of making him creepy. I was really looking forward to this episode. I don't want to say I came away disappointed, but I didn't come out of it like, wow. Like episode 6, I came out saying, wow, that was great, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. But episode 8 didn't do that. I'm really hoping episode 9, resolving the first game story, is going to be great. I'm a little nervous about how it's going to be handled, but
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's a longer episode. Like, can it be an hour and a half or something? That would be really nice.
Well,
So
and I mean, that's not uncommon for this series so far. So
yeah, it's just because like we talked about already, there's not enough infected, and really the end of the game doesn't
it
have a
doesn't
lot of
really have
infected.
infected.
That's
Yeah.
not the focus. So
Yeah.
like they like and if they were going to adapt the last like part of the game, not having infected would be fine. But because we've had no infected, I'm like, can we get some? Like at the
Yeah.
beginning of the episode, like before they get to the hospital, maybe like let's get some horror elements in here and some actual
And
infected.
I'm wondering how people are gonna receive this part that haven't played the game
I'm curious.
because
I am too.
it's intense. But we'll
Very.
leave that for next week, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you smash that like button, share the show with your friends, and never underestimate the value of a quickie.